All right, 1 second here. One second. All right. Uh, all right. Um, a crazy day. That's all I can say. Never been at a circumcision for like 5 hours, 6 hours, but happens. 1 second. All right, welcome to this Q&A, this delayed, very much delayed Q&A. Again, I want to welcome to this Q&A. So I'll just say that I was at the birth of my grandson, circumcision of my grandson, and I happened to be within Jerusalem, not where I live. And there was a lot of there were whatever demonstrations. There was a whole thing here yesterday. A few children, whatever, that died, and they're going to do. The reason there were protests against is because they were going to actually. That's probably maybe we'll speak about that a little bit. The protest they made was they're going to do a new an autopsy on the kids that died. And according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to do an autopsy. All right, doesn't really matter how somebody dies, what condition, or whatever. The first thing you do, first thing you do is you bury the person. So yeah, whatever, the Hever Kadisha, the burial society, they deal with they deal with the body, get the body ready for, to be buried, and that's it. You don't do forbidden to do an autopsy. And the beginning of the state, in general, when the state was founded, there were many times that they did this, or they wanted to do autopsies again, which is forbidden. Which I mean, it's desecration of the body. I mean, it's a very severe desecration of the body. So basically, you never do it. There's no real point. There is no real point to do it, and therefore, even in the middle of the night, sometimes they stole the body out of the morgue or wherever it was, so they wouldn't do an autopsy. So in such a case, there's a mitzvah to go against the law of the land. We've spoken about the law of the land before, but there is a big mitzvah to go against the law of the land if they're going to desecrate the body, right? Was someone asked it's because of carbon monoxide? I'm not sure what it was exactly. I have been following it too much, but in either case, whatever the whatever the reason, it doesn't really matter. Even let's say they found the reason, right? Let's say they found the reason. They found the reason that it was, I don't know, some type of poisoning or neglect, or I don't know, whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. Yeah, it still doesn't give you the right to desecrate the body. And here in Jerusalem, they will not let the body stay and wait for more than 24 hours, no matter what. In other words, custom in Jerusalem to bury the body straight away. In other places, they may wait a certain amount of time, let's say certain family members to get there, but you cannot wait, days on end. It's very bad for the soul. The soul's in a lot of pain. Soul feels a lot of pain, that it doesn't, it can't go to where it goes to where it normally knows, right? It'll go to, a house where he used to live in, or his parents' house, or a kid's house, or, wherever. But the soul was very discombobulated, tremendously discombobulated, and discombobulated to the point where it's painful, right? It's painful. So the most important thing, when someone dies, God forbid someone dies, you bury them as quickly It's possible so they can, they can get their true judgment. And whatever, there are times that, what do you do if you can't find the body? The story here last week during severe rain, 17-year-old boy got washed away and they couldn't find him. So like, you hope for the best, but they had to wait, till they found the body, until at least they found the body, then, then they can start, the funeral, and they can start, the mourning process. It's a horrific thing if you don't know. If you don't know, and that was part of the problem also. With the hostages. The hostages were taken. Parents had no idea. Again, some of them weren't religious, doesn't matter, but when you don't, it's worse not knowing. Right? Especially if you're religious, because then you have to start the mourning process. So when you start the mourning process, and how do you know, and all that. So whatever, it gets complex. It does get complex, and it's bad. It's bad for the soul, right? So doing anything that is going to desecrate, the body, so to speak, is horrific. A person will say, well, the person's dead, who cares? Yeah, but the soul feels it. The soul feels the pain. Um, so the idea is to bury the body as quickly as possible. Again, here we mentioned before, here in Jerusalem, it's 24 hours. When they find out the person died, 24 hours. Like that's it. That they don't let it stay overnight. That's in Jerusalem, not in every place in Israel. It's like that. But again, if you have extenuating circumstances where someone has to fly in, let's say across the country or whatever, it's gonna delay it 6 hours, 8 hours. Okay, but like more than a couple of days, they're not gonna allow that. At least by Orthodox standards. It's tremendous pain for the soul. Tremendous pain for the soul. That I mean, I can't even imagine. I remember I was at a funeral for somebody, and they were putting the body into the hearse and whatever, there was, I won't say there was dilly-dallying going on, but whatever, I don't know, the hearse itself got, I don't know, there's traffic, whatever it was, and there was someone screaming like, just get out of the way, let this person go, because every second that the body's not in the ground, it's pain for the soul, you know. And I'm not talking a lot of time here, right? The hearse was trying to get out, whatever, and the person was screaming, like literally screaming. It's like, get out of the way, let him go, let him. Every split second every second that you don't have that, it's pain, right? We can't imagine what the pain is. Cannot imagine, right? What the pain is. That's why, at least here, they don't wait 24 hours. Like, 24-hour period in Jerusalem, that's it. Yeah. Person's there, not there, they're gonna bury the person. That was custom in Jerusalem. So again, in other places, unless there are certain circumstances, then okay. But if there's inclement weather, I remember I had a relative that passed away last year, a year and a half ago, and like, torrential rains, hurricane, like couldn't do it. Right? You had to wait. Weather-wise, you had to wait. There's no possible way to be out there. But if it's about inconvenience, and say, okay, we're gonna wait. Another story, someone's father died. They wanted to do they wanted to do it like 2 weeks afterwards. They're like, no way. Like, they did everything they could to have it done as quickly as possible, and whatever, they were able to. But it's not about convenience. See, people, a lot of people don't understand, and even the little that I understand, but I think about it, it's not about inconvenience. You're saving the person from tremendous pain. Even though most people say, well, the person's dead, who cares? Like, but But a person's made up of body and soul. The soul being the most important thing. So the body without a soul is nothing. That's why it's forbidden to look at, to look at a body when the body's not there. Or when the soul's not there. Let's say better. When the soul's not there. It's painful. Because you're just looking at a piece of meat. That's all, we'll keep this relatively clean. But you're looking at a piece of meat. That's it. It's painful for the soul for anyone to look at it without being in the body. Yeah, just looking at the body without the soul is painful. Tremendously painful. Yeah, so um whatever. Someone asks, what are the repercussions of an act like that in the holy city? Oh, that's bad. If any let's say like this. If anything bad ever happens, a Jew does something wrong, let's say. Or many Jews do something wrong, either way. Doesn't really matter. Outside of Israel, that's bad. If you do it inside of Israel, inside the whole city, that's worse. 10 times worse. Right? In other words, you can have, let's say, LGBTQ, all over the world. That's bad. Even bad for non-Jews, yeah? But you have it in Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv is one of the biggest, gay capitals of the world, let's say. That's worse. 10 times worse. One of the reasons Sodom got such a severe punishment, not just because of the terrible things they did, but where they were located. Now, God could have, wiped them out if they were outside of Israel. True. Yeah, but the fact they were doing it in God's backyard, one of the commentaries say, is worse. It's a lot worse. So anyone who wants to, come and live in the land of Israel and they're gonna, mess around and not keep what God wants, they're playing with fire. Literally, they're playing with fire. Yeah, you want to do it outside of Israel, it's also bad. Right? I'm not going to say it's not bad, but it's worse. In the holiest city of the world. Yeah, it's a lot worse. Right? And Tel Aviv, by the way, is holier than any place in New York and any place anywhere else. Yeah. Yeah, outside of Israel. Regardless of what goes on there, has holiness. Definitely has holiness. Yeah. But, as my Rabbi would say, anything, I'm not worried about what goes on, in Iran, these other places, all these, they just want to destroy Israel. I'm not worried about that. What am I more worried about? Jews that sin in the land. That's worse. Because that could get the Jewish people spit out of the land, even though we're here right now. Could easily get the Jewish people spit out of the land because of what they're doing in the land itself. So when you contaminate the land spiritually, it makes it worse. Makes it a lot worse. Right? You can contaminate the land outside of Israel, it's already contaminated anyway. Right? That's certainly about what the non-Jews do, but you can make it worse. Could make it worse. Yeah, but doing it in the land itself, it's 10 times worse. Right? So what are the repercussions? It's horrific. The repercussions can be absolutely catastrophic. Catastrophic. Right? I'm not going to open my mouth. Right? As we say, Al tiftach pen l'sot, never open your mouth to Mr. S, to the sot and evil inclination, whatever you want to call him. Right? How much worse could it be? It could be worse. And even if no one's going to listen, that's the point. Even, let's say, there's desecration of graves, which has been a major problem here for many years. Right? You got to protest that also. That's desecration of the body. Right? You can't desecrate human bones. Jewish bones. You can't desecrate. Even if no one's going to listen. The point is, my Rabbi would say, and he had a tradition, from his Rabbi, Moshe Schneider, from the Chazon Ish, from the Brisker Rav, from others, that held you protest anyway, even if no one's going to listen. I asked him once, made a protest against, against whatever it was. And I asked him, I said, you really think, anything's going to come out of this? You really think it's going to do anything? So he told me point blank, he said, listen, I'm not going to get upstairs after 120 years as God's going to say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you protest? Why didn't you say something? Doesn't matter, people are going to listen. Now, some people would say that's not the way. We mentioned this before. Some people will say that's not the way. No one's going to listen anyway. The protest doesn't do anything. And you might as well sit and learn, right? You might as well say Tehillim. You might as well say Psalms. You might as well sit and learn. That's better. Okay, there are people that hold that. There are big rabbinic authorities that hold that, right? But there are also very big authorities that hold not that way. That hold the way is something like this happens. It's going to be a desecration of the body, let's say. Yeah, desecration of the body and the soul for that matter. You got to protest, right? And people will be out there protesting. And they should be. Now, that doesn't give you the right to burn things down. It doesn't give you the right to do other things. Okay. But you're there to protest. Okay. Right? Within reason. Right? Doesn't, even if you hold in the land of Israel does not hold that, that's not the Din de Malchus, right? The law of the land. Right? It's the opinion that holds that you don't have the law of the land in Israel. Okay, but even so, even if you don't, even if we hold there's no law of the land, okay, that give you the right to destroy property? Yeah. Doesn't give you the right to destroy property. Now, some people have asked, you'll see videos of people destroying property and doing other things they shouldn't do. They say, where are their rabbis? You think they have rabbis? They ask. There's a woman walking a religious area that, wasn't dressed, let's say, so appropriately. So someone threw acid in her face. Acid in her face. Someone said, where's that person's rabbi? Who's accountable? The person's accountable. You think his rabbi ever tell him to throw acid in someone's face? Just because they're not dressed right? And if a rabbi did say that, you revoke his license. He's an idiot. No one's ever going to say such a thing. Nobody. Yeah, so the point is, you don't do what you want, but you have people that we'll call them, for lack of a better term, rabble rousers. They have a great time at these things. They yell and scream, push things around, get their aggression out. Very good. Who gives you right to destroy property? My Rabbi said that explicitly. You want to go protest? Protest. Yeah, it doesn't give you a right to steal property, to damage property. Even if you tell me, it's the law of the land, that we don't hold, there's the law of the land in Israel, very good. So even if you don't have the law of the land, so what? Gives you the right to destroy property? Gives you the right to do what you want? Doesn't give you the right. Give you the right, because someone isn't dressed appropriately, throw acid in their face? Come on. But someone asked me this question. It hasn't come up just once. They said, where's this person's rabbi? How can someone tell him to do that? No one told him to do it. They did it himself. I think he's a big fanatic, for God or whatever. So that's what he did. Anyone's going to tell him that's permissible to do? Nobody. And the person who did it's got a screw loose. They absolutely have a screw loose. Nothing to talk about. Right, tell someone to do it? Come on. Yeah. But there are times you have to protest regardless if anyone's going to listen. Again, some people will say, that's not what we do today. Okay. And they have who to rely on. Okay. But you know what? On the other side, you got just as big people saying that you should do it. Under certain circumstances, you should do it. See, tens of thousands of people in the streets today, well, it didn't help me that much. Yeah. Because they were going to do, they were going to do an autopsy. And you can't sit around and let people, do what they want, desecrate the body. Yeah, you got to protest. Very good. So that wasn't good for us. So, I got stuck for 2 hours, couldn't get out. But at the end of the day, there are times you have to protest. But if it's, again, the point is, someone makes a very good point. What about if it's done in the holy city? That's worse. It can be done anywhere. It's bad. I'm not going to say it's not bad. Yeah, you do it in God, God's backyard. That's 10 times worse. So as my Rabbi would say, I'm not afraid, of all these other nations want to rip the Jewish people to shreds. All surrounding Israel. Not worried about that. What am I more worried about? Jews who live in the land that's in. That's worse. Right? And now you get, people protesting a lot because of, taking people into the army or trying to force people, into the army when they don't really want them. And they'll say it's a real numbers game and we need people and this and that. Yeah, that might have changed. But again, without getting into politics, which we're not going to get into, the point is they want us to be like them. That's what they want. But you've never heard of any country, anybody, who would say, divinity students should be out there fighting. Nobody. They have their certain protection every place. In every place. Except here. right? That could be tremendously bad for the Jewish people because they're saying Torah doesn't matter. Torah is not, quote unquote, a real profession. They don't do anything. They're not upholding, they're not, what's the word? They're not feeling the burden, not taking up the burden, so to speak. And people say it's a very volatile issue, very emotional issue. People say, why should my kids have to fight? Right? And your kids, they don't. But the real problem is, there are two things. One problem is, again, without getting into politics, one problem is they will say, the problem is that they want us to be like them. That's their whole guys. They'll say, you gotta feel the burden. You gotta take on, the burden. That's what they're saying. Yeah. Now, for years and years, they didn't need them. They were still saying it, but they didn't need them physically. Now it could be a different story. Yeah. But what's their end goal? Their end goal is to make us like them. That's their end goal. Now, tell me they're religious units and this and that, but that's their end goal, right? That is their end goal. That's one problem. Well, there's a bigger problem. The bigger problem is they don't recognize Torah study for what it is. They don't recognize it. They'll just say it's a total waste of time. You shouldn't get anything from the budget for it. People sitting and learning, get a real job, do something for the world. Write a book on tax law, something really important. Yeah, do something for the world. This isn't doing anything for the world. These are Jews talking, not non-Jews. Right? I'd expect it more from non-Jews. Yeah, because what do they know about Torah? What do they know about mitzvah? What do they know? The first mission, Perkei Avos, Torah, Avoida, Gimel Chasadim upholds the world. Yeah, what do they know about Torah upholding the world? What do they know about spirituality in general? Nothing. Or maybe they think they know. They don't know, right? So if you tell me an non-Jew says it in these professors and academics and who knows what, there are all these, saying that, okay, that I can understand. That I could cut them a tremendous amount of slack. A lot of slack. Yeah. But a Jew? A Jew's going to say what you do is worthless? What you do doesn't matter? It's not doing anything for the world? That's worse. That is 10 times worse. You would, even Pharaoh, reading all about Pharaoh, right? These last weeks and, coming up as well. He also understood when they took the Jewish people and enslaved them, right? Tribe of Levi wasn't enslaved. They were not enslaved. Kohanim, Levim, they were not, Levites, they were not enslaved. Pharaoh understood that. Again, any anti-Semite's not really going to care either way. Okay. But he also understood. In every country, non-Jews understand this. They don't understand about divinity students even during the Vietnam War. Divinity students were exempt from fighting, from going. If you were a divinity student. They understood that. Yeah. So non-Jew understands more than a Jew does. It's pathetic. No offense, any non-Jews listening. That's pathetic. They get the message and the Jews don't. That's worse. That's 10 times worse. 10 times worse. So now you got Jews fighting because they want to secularize Orthodox Jews, and they want to secularize the Torah, and they don't want to recognize that it does anything for the world. That's worse. That's worse almost than anything. You tell me, but the case of Tel Aviv, that's also bad. I'm not going to say it's not bad. Right? But to devalue what Torah is, say it's not worth anything, and it has no values, whatever, and, it's better to write a book on tax law, and Jews are saying this, and then you're going to ask the question, why do we have it so hard in Israel? It's obvious. Where you have the greatest amount of purity, i.e., greatest amount of Torah learning, right? You're also going to have the evil inclination. Mr. S has to have something the opposite. You got to give him something, right? There's devil worship in the land of Israel. Devil worship, of all things. You say, how can that be? You go to Jerusalem, you see it's very different than going to places, say, like Tel Aviv and other places. You feel the difference. You see the difference. Okay. But what's their end goal? Their end goal is to make us like them. That's the end goal. That's what they want. They'll say share the burden. That was the word I was thinking. They'll put it under that guise, right? And now, because of, how many hours people in the reserve had to go and fight and this and that. So there's been a shortage of manpower. So they have a claim now. They may have a claim now. But for the last 20 years before that, they didn't have a claim at all. And they were yelling and screaming about it the whole time, but they had no claim. They didn't need them. I had a friend of mine I went to yeshiva with. It took him 2 years to get into the army. They didn't even want him. They did not want him. Right? Again, today you can tell me it's a different scenario. It may be. But up until this point, they've never needed them. They never wanted them. And even now they can say, oh, we're going to arrest people. Imagine, because they're studying Torah, they're going to arrest them and this and that. They don't even have enough place in jail for them if they're going to do that. It's not practical. The army doesn't want to do it. The army has no interest in it. Yeah, the government's making a whole big thing about it. They've been making a big thing about it. But they don't have enough space. They have no space to put them. So what's the point? What's the point? They have to share the burden, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they have a better claim now. I'm not going to say no. They have a better claim. Yeah, but 20 years ago, they didn't have a claim. 25 years ago, they didn't have a claim. 30 years ago, they didn't have a claim. They still made it. They made it sound like they're not doing anything. The parasites are, whatever, and, they have to serve and blah, 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 but they didn't need them. If it's a war, everyone has to go fight. You take everybody. Take even someone who just recently married within a year. Take them to fight also. Somebody say, what? Isn't this a Milchemes mitzvah? Isn't this, a mitzvah to go fight, against Hamas and this and that? Again, we don't have an Urim V'Tumim, right? We don't have prophets today. Some people will make the claim that is the case. Everyone has to go. Yeah? The great rabbis say not that way. Yeah, so we are our own worst enemy over here. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, and we're not protesting the way we need to, and these things happen, and nobody says anything, that's bad. And even, these other things that go on that are totally forbidden and making, Jewish people look bad, no question, and it's done in the land, as someone there points out, isn't that bad? Isn't that, could that be bad repercussions for Jewish people? 100%. 100%. And that's exactly what my Rabbi would say. He would say it's 10 times worse. Again, it's not good to do it outside of Israel. Yeah, that's very clear. These things are totally forbidden. But to do it in the land, right? So as my Rabbi would say, forget about Iran, forget about these other places. Yeah, they're not the issue. God can use them against us to scare us or whatever, okay. But they're not the issue. What's the main issue? The main issue is when Jews don't do what they're supposed to do in the land itself. That makes it worse. So that, my Rabbi says, is much worse. Much, much worse. Right? Much, much worse. Somebody asked, the soul suffers and do judgments fall on the holy city. When the soul suffers, it doesn't matter. Right? It's not necessarily connected to Jerusalem itself, when the soul suffers. Yeah, per se. The question is if it happened in Jerusalem makes it worse. Yeah. That I would say. But let's say it wasn't in Jerusalem. Yeah. Let's say, I don't know, somewhere in Alaska. I don't know, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, Jews are desecrating different things. Okay. Is that a disgrace to Jerusalem itself per se? It's a disgrace to Jewish people, yeah. Does it weaken the status of the holy city? Doesn't change it. The status of the holy city will stay holy no matter what. Even if God's presence isn't here, it's still holy. Yeah, it's still holy. Could it weaken it in a certain way? It could. It could. Jerusalem of 50 years ago is not the same as it is today. I'm not talking about geographically, I'm talking about in spiritual terms, right? Every generation goes away from Mount Sinai is weaker, right? The generation is weaker. It's not the same as it used to be, no question. And you can't expect it to be because you have what we call Yeridus Adoros. You have, the generation that you're the further away you are from Mount Sinai, right? You go down in levels. You 100% go down in levels. So it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. And even the righteous people today, as we've seen, righteous people today don't compare to righteous people of previous generations, not even close. Right? And my Rabbi is close to everybody in the previous generation. Or just talking about to the Moyle earlier, the one who did circumcision knows my Rabbi more, whatever, longer than me. Right? At least 10 years longer, longer than me. It's whatever, some different stories, different things. As we were schmoozing, circumcision, the bris, and he was connected to everybody in the previous generation, whether they were, Lithuanian Jews, whether they're Hasidic, whatever, everybody. Goes to the Chazon Ish, goes to the Stiper of Chaim Kanievsky's father, blessed memory, Rav Dessler, Rav Eli Lopian, the 3-day age, Rav Shlomo Weinberg, Mordechai Pogormansky, all the Rebbes. Like once I was taking him somewhere, you mentioned all the people he's connected to. They said, "Oh, look, I even know you." I'm like, "You even know me?" He's like, "Yeah, not such a great thing, but I even know you." He's connected to everybody in the previous generation. Yeah. And he was like an ant compared to them. An ant compared to these people. And people say, "What do you mean? He's going to be 100 years old this month." Yeah. Look at all the books he's written and look how much he knows and this and that. True. That is definitely true compared to the previous generation. An ant. And he would admit it himself, not degrading him in any way. Compared to his Rebbe, compared to the Brisker Rav, forgot to mention the Brisker Rav. Yeah. Compared to these great people, yeah. If he was in their presence, they speak, he listens. Yeah. I mean, he would answer back. He'd have what to say, that's for sure. Yeah. But he ain't the one, running the conversation there. And and that's not a knock against him. That just shows how great previous generation was. Yeah. Yeah. I hear different stories about different people and this and that. I mean, we have no connection to this. Very little connection to this. Yeah. But he knew all these great rabbis the previous generation. And he would admit on himself compared to them. Come on, we don't compare. We don't compare. Yeah, it's a totally different world. It's a different way how people looked at the world, a different way how they lived their lives. Different way everything they did was calculated. Yeah. I'm not saying you don't have great people today. I'm not saying that, but compared to previous generations, right? It's not even close. Right? It's not something that it's not something that people don't know. So to speak. So that is so that's one thing. I thought I'd speak about that. The other thing I'll mention, because I was at this birth of my grandson, and one of the things very important there, one of the prayers to say before the circumcision, right? You got two very important people at a circumcision. You got the moil, obviously. He's the one doing the circumcision. And you have the one who holds the baby. Right? What we call the sandak. Some people, translate the godfather. It's not really the godfather, so to speak. Whatever. It's the one that holds the baby. The question is not really a question here, but one of the prayers you say, before the person's going to hold the baby is that you're holding the baby. It's like the baby's like going on an altar, right? It's going on an altar. Now, everyone agrees. This piece of skin has to be taken off, right? It's the only part of the body nobody needs, right? I mean, it is a disagreement between doctors over the years whether good against cancer, take it off. It's not good against cancer. Whatever, they have disagreements, all the time about this. But it's the only command in the Torah. God says it's a piece of flesh you take off. You don't need it. Now, the appendix, they've probably figured out what the reason for the appendix is. But for years, for decades, they didn't really know what the appendix was for. But they came to the conclusion that obviously you need it, but if it bursts, you got to take it out. Okay, because that's dangerous. But very recently came to understand what it may be doing there. But everyone agrees that that you take off. But the question is, yeah, I want to get sidetracked here. The question is, if the baby's going on the lap of the person that's holding it, right? What we call the sandik. Yeah, that person is looked at like you're putting it on an altar. So the question is, could you have a secular Jew hold the baby? And someone will say, even if you say it's okay, yeah, or let's say better, if you say it's not okay, what's the difference? Right? Well, what's the difference over here? So the story goes by Rabbi ben Abuya, right? Otherwise known as Acher, the other one. Rabbi ben Abuya sat on the Sanhedrin. He sat on the Sanhedrin, so he had to be, pretty holy, sit on the Sanhedrin, pretty knowledgeable. And eventually he went off and became a heretic. Now the question is what happened to him. So it's brought down, there's a long Tosfos in Chagiga that discusses what happened to him. And basically, he his father was very close to a lot of people in Rome at that time. And all these great people came, right? And all these great rabbis came as well. And when the rabbis came, they're sitting learning Torah. Pillar of fire came down, surrounded them. So Elisha ben Abuya's father said, wow. He's like, what's going on? You came to burn down my house? So he said, no, this is part of the power of Torah. Right? This is what Torah can do. Yeah, they were sitting and learning, and by sitting and learning, they created this fire. Created a spiritual fire. Well, it was really like a real fire, but whatever. He saw this fire surround them, so to speak. Now, what did Elisha ben Abuya's father, or Abuya as he was known, what did his father say? I want this for my kid. I want my kid to have that kind of power. That Torah should have that kind of power for him. Now, Elisha ben Abuya's father, when they did the circumcision, he was a sandik. He was the one holding the baby. Now, a person can say, they can say whatever they want, but Tosfos there brings down his thoughts at that time went into the child. In other words, he wanted, I don't know, superficiality, I guess, power for his child, even in Torah. Yeah, he wanted that for his kid. Now, if a person's holding the baby, if you don't get grossed out by what you see, or at least you don't look or whatever, what's the person's intention? What should their intention be for this child? Their intention should be, child should have a lot of fear of heaven. Child should grow up to be a big Talmud Chacham. Should be a big rabbinic scholar. Should be ehrlich, should be honest, you think of all good things in spiritual terms. That's what you want to go into the child. Now, if you have a secular person sitting there, he knows what's going on, right? If he watches, he knows what's going on, okay. Nonetheless, he might be thinking, I don't know, he might be thinking about the food. He might be thinking about a lot of other things. Maybe he's thinking all the great secular things he wants for this child. Maybe that's what he's thinking. So a person will say, big deal. So what if he thinks that? That's not going to have an effect. Well, the thoughts of a person are going to go into the child? Never. That'll never happen. Right? And people will say to boot, that's never been proven in science. That what you think is going to go in, at that point, is going to go into the child. Okay, you're right. Science hasn't proven it. 100% science hasn't proven it. But it is brought down. It is brought down at that auspicious moment. That child is like on the altar, and that child could be influenced by what the person thinks. The person has to have clarity of mind, purity of thoughts. That's what they want to go into. Now, whether the person believes it or not, okay. So since Toys is over there telling the story, what happened to Elisha ben Abuya, that's what happened. Yes. Right? So they say when he was learning, even though, top-notch learner and this and that, he's reading books, secular philosophy. There wasn't a time you never saw him come out and study all without these books. All these, bad secular books, right? And eventually what happens, these books got him to think, I don't know, at a crisis of faith, who knows what, and it went off. And he became a heretic. Right? And the last thing that drove him wasn't just one event that happened. It's a culmination of probably many years delving into these things and thinking about these things that totally, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. What happened? He saw a child, the end of the Gemara in Chulin says, he saw a child climb up a ladder, do the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen. Take away the mother bird, push away the mother bird, and take the eggs. Now, he did there are two mitzvahs in the Torah. And the Torah says explicitly you get long life. One of them is shooing away the mother bird, taking the eggs. The other is kibbud avim, honoring parents. Now, he climbed up the ladder. This child climbs up the ladder. Father tells him, okay, climb up the ladder, push away the mother bird, take the eggs. So he's listening to his father, which is kibbud avim, right? Listening to his parents. And he's doing the mitzvah, Shiluach HaKen. What happened? He's doing the mitzvah, push away the mother bird. So what happened? As the child's coming down, he fell, slipped off the ladder, and died. At this point, Elisha ben Abuya said, there is no God. Makes no sense. Right? Why would God allow this child, first of all, performing the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird and listening to his father at the same time? If he gets a long life, why'd he die? Now you can tell me the child was young, he was not punishable, whatever, doesn't matter. Yeah, we're not even going to go into that. That was his question. And that was it. That was the final straw. At that point, he went on. He went totally off. So the Gemara answers that he made a mistake. He made a mistake how to understand the verse. When it talks about a long life over there, the rabbi said, it didn't mean this world. It meant long life in the next world. Okay, so we can have a whole discussion we're not going to get into, but we can have a whole discussion. What does it mean long life in the next world? If you have a portion of the world to come, so maybe that's infinite. So what does it mean long life? Good, right? Good question. But the rabbis chastised him and said, you didn't understand the verse. You didn't read the verse the right way. It did not mean in this world. Right? He made a mistake. Right? He made a mistake, and that's what caused him to go off. That's what the Gemara says. Comes on the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai was the chief rabbi of Baghdad, and he wrote, 60, 70, 80 books more than 100 years ago. And he used to speak about these homiletical texts, right, like these stories in the Gemara, and give, explanation on them. It's called the Ben Yoyada. Never been translated, I don't think it's ever been translated. Right? But if you read them, if you read what he says, it's either a simple explanation or it's Kabbalah. Right? There's usually nothing in between. He's a very, very big Kabbalist. Also. Yeah? So anytime I come to these type of Gemaras, that's one of the things I'm going to look at. See what he says, what's going on. So he says like this, very interesting thing. Elisha ben Abuya's mistake was, what did he say? He said the child was performing the mitzvah kibbud av, honoring his father, and doing the mitzvah Shiluach HaKen. Now, when he pushed away the mother bird to take the eggs, when he pushed away the mother bird to take the eggs, and he's coming down the ladder, did he fulfill the mitzvah or not? So you tell me he did it. He took the eggs, very good. Says the Ben Ish Chai, didn't hit the ground. Had he hit the ground, he would have fulfilled the mitzvah. He didn't totally fulfill the mitzvah. Not only that, when his father said to go do it, he didn't fulfill that either. In other words, once he fell, he didn't fulfill either thing. He didn't fulfill, says the Ben Ish Chai. He says he didn't fulfill the mitzvah Shuach HaKain because he didn't do it. He didn't finish doing the mitzvah. He slipped and he fell. Not only that, he didn't do what his father told him to do. His father told him to go take the eggs. He didn't finish it. So he didn't fulfill either mitzvah. Says the Ben Ish Chai, therefore, that long life he didn't get. Yeah. Why didn't he get it? Because he didn't finish. If you were to tell me he finished the mitzvah, he did both. He listened to his father. And you want to tell me it's in this world? Good, maybe he wouldn't have died. Maybe. But again, if the explanation is talking about the next world, it's a moot point anyway. But what did he say? The Ben Ish Chai says he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. So if he didn't fulfill the mitzvah, what does the end of the verse say? By keeping up aim, honoring parents, long life. What does it say at the end of Shuach HaKain? Taking away the mother bird, long life. But he didn't get long life. Why not? Says Ben Ish Chai, he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. He didn't do it. It's a different explanation. Right? Different explanation of what the rabbis answered to Elisha ben Abuya. Right? Simple explanation would be, it doesn't mean in this world. So even if he died, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean this world, it means the spiritual world. Okay. What's the point? Point is that person holding the baby has a lot of power here. Tremendous time. Right? That person is considered like 94 or 84 fasts by the one holding it. It's a very coveted thing, that somebody would want at least once in their life. Right? Be able to hold the baby, at the bris. Whether you look or not, again, doesn't matter. But the point is, it's something that, someone would probably, somebody would probably want. It's, grandfather should have it. Why not? Great-grandfather's still alive. Great rabbi you give to them. You give. But you're putting the baby, the point is you're putting the baby on an altar. You don't put, if you're putting the baby on an altar, you don't want that altar to be tarnished. Right? You don't want that altar, tarnish is a good word. Yeah, because the person holding the baby's got a lot of power at this point. Spiritual power. Now people say, come on, abracadabra, spiritual cooties, whatever. I try to explain cooties to somebody, didn't understand what cooties were. Very hard to explain. It was very, very hard to explain. I didn't really do a good job of it. Probably got an F trying to explain it. But okay. I want to get distracted here. Yeah, it's okay. It's never been proven. It's something never been proven. Yeah, but we believe putting the child, taking off the foreskin is like putting him on an altar. If you put him on an altar, you don't want that altar to be blemished. Because if that altar is blemished in any way, within reason, then that child is blemished. You're never going to see it. Right? And if something happens to the child later, people aren't going to say, oh, see? It must be the person who held him didn't have the right intention. No one's going to make that connection. Right? They'll say bad influences, bad friends, bad this. Okay, the learning disability, mental health issues, other things. They'll blame it on 150,000 other things. Yeah? But if they give it to the wrong person to hold the baby, again, the person doesn't have to be on like the highest spiritual level. That's not the point. But they have to be holding somewhere in the world. They have to be keeping Shabbos. They have to be keeping Torah and mitzvahs. It's a merit. They get the ability to give out blessings. 100%. I've given myself a lot of blessings today. Yeah, I give to other people also. Yeah, but it's a tremendous, it's also someone who also brought down as an omen, as a segula, that someone holds the baby at a bris. It's a segula for ashiras, for wealth. Now they asked the Steipler going, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, blessed memory, that he was Santik many times. Right? He's a very holy person, no question. On Torah Giants, the last generation, no question. And they said you were Sandik for so many people. How come you never made money? Where was the segula for Ashiris? For wealth. So he answered tongue in cheek. He said, where my wealth is? It's in all the books I've written on the Talmud that people learn. That's my wealth. So I was telling the Moyle today, well, about so he told me that when I hit it big, when I hit it big, I shouldn't forget him. Right? A number of things to support. He goes, don't worry. He said, when you hit it big, he said, don't forget about me. So I told him the story about the stipend. He said, doesn't matter. He said, if you get it, call me up. We'll talk. So whatever. It's a very emotional thing. I will say, regardless of whether a person. I remember many years ago, I had a cousin that was circumcised. So my father said, it might be a good thing to go into. So, you know, after watching a little bit, I felt faint and like that was it. I was like, ain't gonna be for me. But some people not necessarily squeamish. Actually, today I wasn't really so squeamish today. But whatever. It's first of all, it's the next generation, right? It's to really it's your kid and their kid, so it's really a continuation, right? It's a continuation of that. But here it's interesting because the Moyle who did it, the son-in-law of mine has four other brothers. Four other brothers. So he did circumcision for all of them. I think for most of them. And for others also, I think in the family. So like I say, it was a closing the circle, definitely not a closing the circle. But it's interesting that, he's known this family for, forever, and I've known him for, I don't know, probably 25, close to 30 years, probably through my Rabbi as well. Right. So, but it's a big thing. I said, not only, is this the next generation, but I said, you're doing the circumcision for now the second generation. And, he should be well, whatever, do third generation. Be able to do circumcision for third generation. It's a big thing. It's not a small, it's not a small thing. It's definitely not a small thing over here. So, there's a lot of, there's a lot of emotion. It's a big, it's a big thing. Um, the whole thing is a big thing because now, you're bringing, another child into the covenant, right? So I mentioned when I spoke that a covenant's usually between two people, right? A person makes a deal with somebody, they call it a bris. You make a pact, right? Whether it's a bill of sale or something about or something else, you make an agreement, right? It's an agreement between two people. What's the connection to circumcision? Because it's an agreement between the parents and the child, even though a child doesn't really have a say in the matter, right? But it's an agreement between, parents and child and God saying that we're sticking with this covenant. We're bringing this baby into the covenant. You say at the end, shekanis l'torah chupa ma'asim tovim, right? That so shekanis l'bris, when you enter the child into the covenant, i.e. in the circumcision, that's what bris really means, is a covenant. When you bring in the child to the covenant, you should also be able to see that you should also enter the Torah, to learn Torah, right, and to do good deeds, to do mitzvahs. For a parent to see that with a grandchild, that's continuation. I mean, it's not continuation of my name per se, but it's a continuation. That's the next generation, which is, even though I wasn't holding the baby, it's still an emotional thing. Still a tremendously, emotional thing. I remember one of my other son-in-laws, whatever, my daughter had a boy, and her first boy, and so I got the honor to call out the name, and I should have really known what the name was going to be, because shortly before that, my father had died, and I should have known they probably got a name after him. And whatever, I called out the name. They added a name. They had a name before my father's name, so he has three names now. My grandson, I'll tell him I mentioned him in a class, will probably be very excited, right? Is all 6 right now. So his name is Yehuda Nachum Dov. My father's name was Nachum Dov. So they added a name. So they added the name Yehuda. They added the name Yehuda to, to that name. So they call him Yehuda Dov, right? So when they're mad at him, they call him by his full name, Yehuda Nachum Dov. Okay, but I called out the name again. You're doing these things. You don't necessarily think like, what's the name going to be and this. I wasn't really thinking, right? I wasn't really, thinking so much, at the time. And then when he told me the name, I stopped. Right? I mean, there's like a whole prayer to say, right? And it's like, I looked at him, he looked at me, I said the name, and whatever, it's very emotional. Yeah, but what's the point? The point is, okay, so my father passed away 12 years ago, right? 12 years ago. And now he's named, so now I have a grandson named after, that's also, a continuation, right? And that's, good character traits of my father, blessed memory, right? Should take them on, right, as well. But that's a whole line. And so it doesn't stop, right? It's a total continuation. So when you see that, it's an amazing thing. It's an emotional thing, right? It's an emotional thing as well. But this thing has power. The point is, this thing has power, right? What you think has power, right? I can speak about that for 2 days. I'm not going to, but I mentioned this many times. What you think, has an effect on who you are. Yeah, it has an effect on your psyche. And that means, right, very simply, if a person, let's say, makes a racist statement, and the person says, oh, that was a slip of the tongue. No, that wasn't a slip of the tongue. You obviously have thought about it before, and that's what you think. Now you're upset, you got caught, and now you have to apologize. May have to go through some classes a little bit. Yeah. But that's what you thought. That's exactly what you meant. You just spit it out maybe when you shouldn't have. Right? But what does that mean? In very, very simple language, what a person thinks can manifest itself, right? It can manifest itself in words. It can manifest itself in deeds. Words are more important here, right? Because the person will say, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Oh, you meant to say it. 100% you meant to say it. Now, why did you say it? I don't know. Person was caught off guard. They weren't thinking, whatever. So they said it. Very good. They said it. Yeah, so now they have to apologize. Other things, very good. But when they said it, they meant it. So you have people like, well, even quote Whoopi Goldberg over here. She said things, she means it. That's what she thinks. She's not beating around the bush, not giving Webster's 8th definition. She says what she thinks, okay? For better or for worse. Yeah? But when someone comes out and says something, then they get called on it. I shouldn't have said that. Because now they're going to lose, sponsorships and other things. They say, oh, I can't believe I said this, or whatever, and they have to apologize. They're upset they have to apologize. Don't get me wrong. They are plenty upset they have to apologize. Yeah, but they can never say I didn't mean it. I've spoken about this a lot, so I'm not going to speak about it too much. But the point is, when a person says something, it means they thought about it before. Doesn't matter how much time they thought about it. They actually believe it. They said it. They actually said it. Right? So the hard part is they'll say, oh, I didn't mean it. I shouldn't have said it that way. Yeah, they're going to backtrack because they get a lot of flack for it. Okay. They get a lot of flack for it. You can't say they didn't mean it. Right? Now, this is the point. When a person thinks something, whether it's good or bad, it's now part of your system. It's part of your psyche. Now, you have to work hard if it's bad to get rid of it. Okay. But since it's part of your system, you can't say, if you say something on that, you can never make the statement legitimately and say, I didn't mean it. You meant it. Yeah, you absolutely meant it. Since, the story was, you had this basketball player live streaming a video game, always a bad idea. He made an anti-Semitic statement. So he was injured anyway. They fined him, right, for the rest of the season, whatever it was. But he meant it. He meant what he said. He could have said about his own people, okay, but he didn't. He could have said about Asians, that would have been bad. He could have said it about blacks, would have been bad. He could have said it about, Hispanics, that would have been bad. He said it against Jews. Yeah. He said it against Jews. Now you want to tell me that's not what he thinks? That's what he thinks. I have no problem with that. Just be honest. That's what he thinks. He doesn't like Jews and all that. Very good. That's what he thinks. Okay. But to say I never thought it? To say it was a slip of the tongue? Yeah. Why was it a slip of the tongue? Because he said it. And he said it to a wide audience. Big mistake. Big, big mistake. But he said it. Do you want to tell me he didn't believe it? He never thought about it before. Oh, I guarantee he thought about it before. In what context? Doesn't matter. He thought about it. And he said it. So when you make a statement like that, there's no taking it back. I mean, you can try damage control, right? But this is what happened to Elisha ben Abui's father. He didn't say anything. It's what he thought, right? It's what he wanted for his kid. So he put all that into his kid. Now you gotta say, that doesn't mean anything. It has effect. Saying it has more of an effect. If he said it outright, this is what I want for my child, I'm going to put this into my child, I'm going to make it a reality, so to speak, that can have a very strong effect. Right? And this is why you would not have a secular person hold the baby at a circumcision. Some offense to who they are. I mean, it is probably, right? But, in spiritual terms, you can't do that. That can cause damage to your kid. Now, they won't care. They'll think you just don't want to honor them, right? And in that case, I'll just say that you do whatever you can to honor people until you can't. It's not a personal thing, right? For one example, if a secular Jew desecrates Shabbos, and he's got the status of a non-Jew, there are certain things they do. Yeah. In other words, they pour a bottle of wine that's not cooked. Can't drink it. Jew can't drink it. They can't cook food for you from beginning to end, right? Unless the Jew has something to do with it. It's called Bishul Akum, but they're Jewish. Okay. There are certain things they can't do because of their status. It's not saying, oh, we're going to nail you and we're happy now. No. There's reality, right? There is a reality. It's not a personal thing. They'll take it personally, but it's not a personal, it's not a personal thing. If you keep Shabbos, I can honor you like this, right? If you keep Shabbos, I can honor you like that. If you don't keep Shabbos for whatever reason, I can't. It's an impossibility. Yeah, you're just looking down on me. You don't want to give this. It has nothing to do with not giving an honor. I've been through this. I can tell you. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact you can't. It's a painful thing. Okay, but it's not personal. They'll take it personally, right? This is the reason. This is the reason. If you get someone who barely believes in God at all, you want them holding that child? No. You want to answer amen to their blessings? No. In general. Yeah. Why would you answer amen? Like their thoughts or who knows where, right? This comes up, right? This definitely comes up. So the thoughts and the actions of what a person does, the thoughts even, sometimes even more important, right? Have a total effect, right? Have a total effect even if we don't see it. It will have an effect. Someone asks, does Moyle have to be a doctor? No. Does not have to be a doctor. Some people will be happy that they're a doctor in case anything happens, right? But they absolutely do not have to be a doctor. This Moyle told me he did his first one, I think, when he was like 21. But he learned under like top of the top in America. So he's been doing this for years, for 40 years more. So I was telling him, I was like, wow, that makes you about 87. According to my math, he goes, no, your math is off. Your math is way off. Yeah. I mean, it was person, whatever. Love him like a brother, whatever. Big Talmud Chacham also, big, rabbinic scholar. So whatever. I had a good schmooze today. It was very light in a lot of ways. Anyway, yeah, it does not have to be a doctor. That's not what he's doing, though. Obviously, he's got to, he's got to learn under someone who knows what they're doing, or can teach them, what to do. But 100%, they have to watch someone do it for months. It's not just like a one-time thing. You watch it, you do it. You got to see. Not each person's created, exactly the same. So, sometimes there's more skin, sometimes there's less skin, sometimes whatever. We'll go into the gruesome details. But some people are happy if the Moyle happens to be a doctor also. But there's no obligation. If you know what you're doing, then there's no obligation. Anyway, I'm going to stop here again. I do apologize for starting very late. Definitely under onus on my part. But I want to thank everyone for coming. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. On Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, ethics for fathers, book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email? RabbiChaimKoffman@gmail.com. RabbiChaimKoffman@gmail.com. Wish have a good beginning of the day, middle of the